Throughout the 1900s, several key events involving Asian Americans took place. During World War II, the US military entered the war after the Japanese attacked a US naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7, 1941. During the war, many Americans became suspicious of Japanese Americans and immigrants, especially after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Although no evidence proved these suspicions true, they feared that people of Japanese descent in the US might be spies for Japan. The US government forced many Japanese Americans into internment camps because of this fear. This included Japanese immigrants and citizens born in the US. In the internment camps, Japanese Americans faced harsh and difficult conditions. Many lived in cramped buildings called barracks. Multiple families often shared these small spaces with little privacy. Many of these camps were also in desert regions, leading to extreme temperatures and harsh weather. Guard towers and barbed wire fences also surrounded the camps, not allowing people to move freely. Internees were constantly surveilled by armed guards. The government continued to imprison and limit the freedom of Japanese Americans, violating the rights of many Japanese Americans during the World War II. Eventually, the Japanese internment camps closed due to a combination of factors, including the end of the war and protests against racial discrimination. On September 8, 1965, the beginning of the Delano Grape Strike took place. A strike is when a collective group of employees refuse to work for their employers unless they meet certain demands. The Delano Grape Strike was a strike by Filipino-American farm workers in Delano, California, led by Larry Italong and Ben Ginez. These workers demanded higher wages and better working conditions. Larry Italong later asked for the support of the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA, and its founders, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. Although Cesar Chavez didn't feel like the association was ready for the strike, the members of the NFWA voted in favor of the strike, helping join the protest. Many of the farm workers faced challenges in these strikes with disagreement from their employers, the Delano grape growers, law enforcement, and violence from some groups. Some of the farm workers were replaced by new workers to weaken the strike. The strike lasted 5 years. However, the effort of the workers eventually paid off. In 1970, many of the growers in the Delano area agreed to better pay, working conditions, and union protection. The Delano Grape Strike showed the strength and union of farm workers, helping change the work field and history. The Vietnam War took place from 1955 to 1975, mainly stemming from the spread of communism. Communism is a system where property and items are owned by the public. In a communist system, the goal is for everyone to share and have things according to their skills and needs. The Vietnam War was fought between North Vietnam, led by Communist leader Ho Chi Minh, and South Vietnam, which was supported by the United States and other anti-communist allies. The Vietnam War was influenced by the conflict of the Cold War and spread of communism. The US became involved in the Vietnam War to prevent communism from growing. The government feared that if one country fell to communism, the others would follow. However, US military faced many challenges, having a hard time getting a victory because of the North's strong warfare strategies and knowledge of the land. By 1973, the US withdrew its troops from Vietnam. In 1975, South Vietnam was fully invaded by North Vietnam. This resulted in a large number of Vietnamese refugees to both immigrate to and seek asylum in the United States. To immigrate means to move from one country to another to live there permanently. Seeking asylum is different from immigration, as it means you ask another country to protect you and grant you permission to live there because you are not safe in your home country. In 1975 alone, about 125,000 Vietnamese were evacuated and resettled in the US. The war had many consequences on Vietnam and the US, ending in many deaths and injuries. The Vietnam War continued to be one of the biggest conflicts of the 20th century. In the late 1960s and 1970s, the Asian American movement, also known as the Asian Power Movement, took place. The movement looked to address racism and social injustices faced by Asian Americans. Many Asian Americans joined to gain political and economic strength. The term yellow power rose with this movement. The term yellow was often used in a racist way to stereotype and discriminate against Asian people dating back to the 1700s. However, leaders in this movement used yellow power as a way to represent pride in Asian heritage and unite Asian communities. Many Asian American civil rights activists attempted to protest against events like Japanese internment camps and the US involvement in the Vietnam War. Students at college campuses also participated in strikes and fought for more inclusive education. The Asian Power Movement allowed many Asian American leaders to fight for equality and fair treatment, protesting against stereotypes and racism. This movement allowed Asian Americans to continue their fight for civil rights and social justice in the United States. Throughout the 1900s, there were many events that involved Asian Americans. These events brought both positive and negative changes for the Asian American community, having a long-lasting impact on history. In the 1850s to 1900s, many Asian ethnicities immigrated to the Americas hoping to achieve a better life economically for themselves and their families. In 1848, the first major wave of Chinese immigrants arrived in San Francisco. Political unrest and high taxes from the Opium Wars, flood, and famine drove many Chinese citizens to immigrate for better economic opportunities. These workers often lived in groups at mine claims that white workers had previously abandoned, looking for scraps of leftover gold that were missed. Soon, China was hit with a flood, bringing even more Chinese immigrants to San Francisco. At the end of the 1950s, a fifth of the total mining population were composed of Chinese immigrants. Competition amongst other factors sparked racism throughout the mines. White workers despised the growing number of Chinese immigrants as immigration caused an increase in competition amongst resources. Chinese workers faced physical violence and were often robbed, murdered, and beaten by white laborers. In addition to these struggles, new laws were enacted to make it increasingly difficult for Chinese workers to stay in the U.S. In 1850, California passed the Foreign Miners Tax, a discriminatory tax mainly targeting Chinese miners that required them to pay a monthly fee for the right to mine. In total, Chinese workers paid more than $15 million in taxes. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act went into effect, banning the immigration of Chinese laborers for 10 years. This was the first law in history of the U.S. restricting immigration based on race and would serve as an example in future policies. As a result of racial violence and discrimination, Chinese immigrants built Chinatowns, a safe haven providing the community with a sense of safety, familiarity, and support. Many Chinese laborers eventually left mining to work in other fields, such as the railroads, as a result of harsh and unfair mining taxes. From 1863 to 1869, approximately 15,000 Chinese laborers helped to construct the Transcontinental Railroad, laying 690 miles of tracks from Sacramento, California to Promontory, Utah. They faced harsh working conditions, including extreme weather and intensive labor. Despite making up over 90% of the workforce constructing the railroad, Chinese workers were treated unequally. They received less than half the pay of white workers, worked longer hours, and had to purchase their own meals and room. Ultimately, the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad was only successful because of the labor of Chinese workers. Despite this, Chinese immigrants were often faced with discrimination and violence just because of their ethnicity. Next, we'll explore the immigration history of Japanese Americans. The first wave of Japanese immigrants arrived in Hawaii from 1886 to 1911. Motivated by economic opportunity in the US, many Japanese immigrants left Japan because they were struggling to find employment as competition in the country increased quickly. Word spread of the booming economy of the US to Japan, so in 1868, the Hawaiian consul secretly hired 148 workers from Japan to Hawaii due to immigration barriers. However, in the 1880s, the immigration barriers began to drop, and the first big wave of Japanese immigration began. Japanese immigrants, mostly ambitious young men seeking economic opportunity, worked on sugarcane plantations. However, their living conditions were often unsanitary, and the work was difficult. Japanese Americans largely contributed to shaping the economy of Hawaii. There's still a large Japanese population in Hawaii today. Next, we'll explore the history of the Korean American immigration. Similar to the history of Japanese Americans, the first wave of Korean immigrants came to Hawaii in 1903 to work on pineapple and sugar plantations. By 1905, more than 7,000 Koreans had immigrated to Hawaii. Most immigrants were women and children escaping famine and political disputes in Korea. Like the Japanese workers, Korean Americans also significantly shaped the economy of Hawaii. Both ethnicities have become an important part of Hawaii's diverse culture today. On April 30, 1965, South Vietnam fell to North Vietnam. During that time, Vietnam was divided into the Communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh, and the Anti-Communist South, led by Ngo Dinh Diem. Communism is when everyone shares everything equally, although this does not accurately define communism in Vietnam. Many South Vietnamese refugees began to immigrate to and seek asylum in the United States once Vietnam fell under communism in 1975. Around 125,000 refugees were brought into the U.S. through airlifts. Many infants and children were brought from South Vietnam at the end of the war. This was the first major mass immigration of the Vietnamese. After the North and South joined together under communism, many people in Laos fled to their homeland, just west of Vietnam. Many people fled across the Mekong River into Thailand due to hidden bombs which made it unsafe to work, play, and live on their lands. Roughly 105,477 Laotians fled to the United States seeking safety and better life for themselves. In the late 19th century, thousands of Punjabi Sikh men settled in California, Oregon, and Washington. Many of them hoped to make money, seeing the increase in the need for farm labor across the states. Additionally, many of them wanted to pursue a better education in the U.S. On the West Coast, many Indian immigrants worked manual labor, particularly in agriculture. Others worked in factories or as mechanics and engineers. The first Filipinos arrived in the U.S. during the 16th century under the Spanish Empire. Filipino sailors arrived at Morro Bay, California on October 18, 1587. The Filipinos were the first Asian ethnicity to reach and settle in the Americas, even before the first English colonies. Asian American communities have shaped the United States as we know it today, with influences rooted deep into history, even before the establishment of the English colonies. Yet, these historical impacts go discredited within the classroom and beyond. Understanding the impacts of Asian Americans on the history of the US helps us recognize the importance of different communities and unite us together as one. In the current day, we see many Asian American figures in media, politics, sports, art, and more. But just a few decades ago, American society looked very different. So that brings us to the question, what has changed? The first prominent Asian American figures in politics emerged in 1957. Dalip Singh Sahn became the first Asian American to serve in Congress and the House of Representatives until 1963. Additionally, Hiram Fong was elected senator in 1959, serving for almost 20 years. It's important to recognize these people because it proved that Asian Americans had a place in politics just like other Americans. Flash forward to May 1990, President Bush signed a law creating the first ever AAPI Heritage Month. Afterwards, more Asian Americans such as Norman Mineta and Elaine Chao emerged as well, serving in the presidential cabinet. Bruce Lee and Anna May Wong were among the first Asian Americans within the film industry, emerging as the first Chinese American film stars in the world. The representation expanded the roles of Asian Americans in Hollywood. However, many of those roles that Asian American actors played in the 20th century racially stereotyped to different ethnicities. Since then, Asian representation within film and entertainment has evolved to be more accurate and incredibly successful as well. The romantic comedy Crazy Rich Asians made over $238 million, becoming North America's highest earning romantic comedy in a decade. Asian American success can also be seen in other forms of entertainments, sports. Talented figures such as snowboarder Chloe Kim, gymnast Sunisa Lee, and diver Sammy Lee are just a few examples of Asian athletes representing the US at the Olympics. The representation of the US at an international level shows that Asians are not just a foreign people, rather they are part of the American identity as well. In conclusion, these Asian Americans have paved the way for our communities, showing that despite any barriers they may have faced because of their ethnicity or race, success is possible. Their contributions show us that Asian Americans are important to the success of the US, whether that is through politics, film and entertainment, or their international recognition through sports, and that it's possible for other Asian Americans to achieve their dreams as well.